Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fantastic episode for you today. I am joined by author Aaron Ryan coming back to talk about Dissonance Volume 2, The Reckoning. Aaron, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing, Logan?
I'm ecstatic because of Volume 2 that I didn't expect to be out uh, for at least another couple of months or a year. You told me you were trucking along with it, but dude, this is pretty impressive.
When you have a good story, you want to get it out there is the problem, and I itch to just get them published. It's one of those things where you're like, that's the ultimate target and goal and destination is actually getting it published. So I really have a hard time waiting. I want to do it right in the interim, write it well, edit it well, blah blah blah. But I just can't wait to get it out there. So
Yeah, understood. Understood. And as well you should, because it for as fast as you write, the story doesn't feel rushed, right?
good.
So you're going at a pace I feel that really fits you, really fits the story. There's no detail that's kind of left wanting. It's got everything I'm looking for in a sci-fi adventure action story. So your expediency is something I can really appreciate.
That's great. Expediency is important. Yeah.
Yes. I would like to end. This is going to be spoiler free for volume two, by the way. Uh, Go out and get it, folks. Amazon, really, really helpful. Um, but you start out, yeah, I love that cover, dude. It's so cool.
Did I hold it up nice and close?
Yeah, there you go. It the title, yeah, that almost looks like the same font and structure of like one of the old Red Alert games, like Red Alert 3 or Yuri's Revenge or whatever is super cool. Little nostalgic. But you start off before the story in this volume with a note about AI that I didn't expect that struck me as pretty important. Um, and it's how people are using it to basically cheat on their writings and take this quick and easy path as Vader did, becoming agents of evil in the process. Right.
Very exactly.
So
Very nice
yeah,
diet.
you're urging your fellow authors to preserve the sacred gift of the ability to create that's been given to humanity and to keep unadulterated creation alive. I think that is a vastly important message for so many reasons. Why did you decide to include that here?
So there's two reasons actually. One was kind of a backdated proclamation. I was reading, I don't remember if it was the Resistance trilogy by K.A. Riley or another one before that, but she had a similar note in there. Whoever it was had a similar note, and I thought that's brilliant. It needs to be incorporated. I head up a 32,000 member Facebook group of authors and writers. It's one of them that are in there and doing well, and it's a common refrain. It's a ongoing subject that repeatedly gets brought up. But prior to that, I'm a musician as well, and I produced CDs last year. One of them is called Human, and it is very much the opposite of in this world of AI. It's nipping at the corners of everything we do. I'm a voiceover artist, as you can see, and AI is is working to the detriment of my voiceover career as well. Um, yes, it's easy. Sure, you can program this, and ooh, that's so neat. And you can assign an AI voice to voice your script if you want, and I'll gladly be out the cash. Thanks. But then on the authoring side, you're the one doing the creating. Why would you ever resort to using some cheap tool? It's just desperation, it's lack of creativity to use Chat GPT or something, slap together some thoughts, have it write you the story, throw it onto Amazon KDP or Draft 2 Digital or Ingram Spark, get it into circulation, and then how lame is that? You had no creative stake in that, and kind of how dare you profit off of somebody else's invention? Um, it's just a complete lack of innovation. It's just disgraceful.
Really well put. And it's just something that's so easy to use that you there's a lot less effort to abuse it than there is to use it correctly, right? You said you're a voiceover artist. I imagine one way that you could use an AI program that is tailor made for uh, voiceover artists is, say, um, AI generator, uh, help me sound like Steve Blum, or whatever, or help me uh, do XYZ to try and fit this character. Like, what if you can use it as a teaching method, as a tool for that, to make yourself better. So you're still putting in the work, I think. You're just, I think this is how it should be used if it's going to be used, um, as more of a tool than an escape hatch for just lazy people.
Yeah, well put. I mean, it is a tool, and there are capitalists out there, and think tools like this tend to just bring the capitalists out of the woodwork. I can make a quick buck is the fantasy that I think just overtakes all these people's logic. Um, you know, um, Gosh, Darth Vader's voice.
James Earl Jones.
Thank you. James Earl Jones, I believe last year or something, had sold his rights to his voice to AI, and so I mean he came under fire from the voiceover community and his colleagues, several of his colleagues, that were like, "What are you doing? Why would you do that?" Um, AI is such a controversial topic. There are so many pros. There are so many more cons, and I hope that it stays that way because it's just you need humans in the mix, and you need humans to create. I don't like calling. No one likes this ending. Calling a company and hearing for Bob, press one. For
Mm-hmm.
Jack, two. Yeah, granted, the voices are getting more and more realistic and stuff. I really like. I can't say her name or she'll activate, but Alexa does a job around our house in giving us information, and she sounds very realistic. Doesn't mean that I want to endorse my own voice becoming put in a small orb for someone else's profit. Siri, Susan Johnson, or whatever her last name was, who did the voice of Siri. Oh, I activated her.
Yeah.
Uh, she didn't get paid anything. Uh, I mean, she got paid a small sum, but she should have been paid a fortune for being the voice of Siri and going carrying Apple's AI mantle in that regard. She didn't. It's a shame. Legislation hasn't caught up with it either, and I hope that it does soon.
Yeah, to me, a pretty good analogy would be, say, the practical effects that were created and used for um, the original Star Wars movie versus the heavy reliance on CGI nowadays. Practical effects, what you're looking at actually exists, right? It's real. It was made by human hands and tools. It's a lot more blood, sweat, and tears, and paint, and motor oil, whatever else gone into it. You can tell a great practical effect when you see it, right?
Yeah,
Versus something that's just 1,000% CGI. You know it's not there. You know it's a computer generated graphic.
yeah,
Um, so we lose a bit of element of connectivity with that. Like, if I could reach through the screen and grab the practical effect, I know I could. I
yeah.
cannot reach through the screen and grab a CGI character.
Correct. It's just ones and zeros. This was created by I don't know the program, but it's a CGI program, and so he created this monster. But if this was ever adapted to screen, and fingers crossed, knock on laminate, um, I would hope to God that they would actually use puppeteers and uh, full body costumes that are so lifelike and tangible, and like you said, you know it's there. And I would love to see something like this materialize on screen. Granted, they're flying through the air and they're zipping through it, Mach 1, whatever. That is hard to reproduce without CGI. But I hope for the overwhelming bit of it that tangibility and verisimilitude is preserved. When, not if, my book gets adapted to screen, but
When, and I will be a huge fan. I'll be first in line to see that film,
well,
or
I'll be first.
well, yeah, you'll be first. I'll be a happy like fourth or fifth in line,
Yeah.
uh, or show. However it gets adapted, I'll be thrilled whenever it finally does. Now, the style in which both this and Volume One were written, and I'm talking font wise, how the paragraphs are structured, the basic framework of how you orient the words in the sentences itself. It all reminds me of something you might see in, say, an older style war movie with analog computers, or some military report that we would be printed, and for dramatic effect you might zoom in on it. um, was there any in-depth thought into giving it this style, or is it something that happened just a lot more naturally, like, I like that font, here we go?
Yeah.
Or because to me it's really cool. I think it's a cool way to go.
Well, and if you're alluding to the thing that I think you're thinking of when there's Pete Beckinsale in the blockade hands a printout, military printout, certainly not dot matrix, printout like the prints, um, but a printout nonetheless to Jet and Bassett, who are there visiting him in Halcyon, video headquarters there with the Beast computer. Overall, the squeakier, cleaner, more streamlined, revolutionary, innovative, forward-looking tech tends to lend itself to more of a aesthetic future and an antiseptic future where things are ideal and they're functioning normally and all that stuff. I didn't want that. I mean, for this, they're stuck in, granted, in 2026, which is more advanced than an 80s or a 90s, or an aughts movie. But I think I wanted to try to strike a balance and not push too far forward with some technology. Others would be clearly dated, and there are scenes that will happen that you'll see in Volume 3 where there are hackers, and they are working. Hackers didn't really gain prominence in the mental psyche of the world until like what the 90s or the aughts, and now they're replete. There's They're all over the place. But DDoS attacks and brute force attacks and all those things are much more understood now, but it's still only 2024. So I needed to try to find a balance where I wasn't too far in the future to leave people behind, in the notion that the characters are stuck in time, even though they're forward in time, not through time travel, but they've been arrested development since 2026. You have to really not give things too squeaky clean. Otherwise, like, there's no sense of desperation. Um, you're working with what you have. This is all you have. So, but if you go too far back, yeah, then it's just extraordinarily dated. Like, analog landlines and the curvy cables, mouse cables coming out of the phones.
Yeah, you're not hinging the fate of the world on a floppy disk,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
3.5 or 5.25, maybe. I remember them well.
Yeah. Now, in the last book, we meet these aliens who are bent on destroying us, the Gorgons, right? They use telekinetic and telepathic methods to freeze and devour humans, right? Now, the main characters, Sergeant Cameron Jet Shipley and his brother, Private uh, Wyatt Rutt Shipley, they end up utilizing, jumping off that technology that we're talking about. They're using this new tech that's tailor made to fight the Gorgons called this dissonant tidal flood, right? And that stuff is really cool to me. That slightly newer age EMP kind of stuff, but it's tweaked a little bit to work in a way that it's not really supposed to, but for the purposes of them fighting the Gorgons, it's pretty effective. Now,
Yeah.
this story, it plays a lot with tech and weapon tactics that are sensory based, right? I mean, what's the slogan of the book? You're alluding a lot to some sensory play here. Like, was this a choice that was actively made, or did it evolve this way kind of naturally while you wrote the story?
I think both. I mean, it definitely evolved both. Excuse me. Tail end of it pulled here. Um, Ultimately, the technology, and there is an explanation, a short one, in volume one, that the technology came with the Gorgons. I don't want to explain everything and do an information dump and say, it happened this way precisely, and the things were attached to their craft. It essentially was to enable them to enter Earth's atmosphere, to travel at high speeds, through space, and not be so affected by the depressurization and pressurization. Hi, I'm a voiceover artist. Uh, that comes with different altitudes and elevation and things like that that can really mess with your equilibrium and your insides. So this technology was there to help them. It ends up becoming their Achilles heel. That technology, yeah, it's through training, through experimentation with what is this thing, this amulet, this piece of rock. What is this thing that humans are able to discover how to actually use it, harness it, broadcast high frequency waves much higher than what dogs are susceptible to, and therefore they figure out what it was for. Well, let's turn it against them. They don't like these high pressure sounds, so we're going to manufacture the high pressure sounds using these. Flip it on its head, now you have a weapon. The sensory bit, like, plug your ears and whatever you do, don't look. The plug your ears was, yes, referring to something loud is coming. Um, don't look obviously refers to the Gorgons. You cannot look at them or you'll be frozen and immobilized and eaten. But it's very handcuffing to be, like this, and you're deprived of all of your senses. What do you do? Um, but that that's kind of one of the journeys that the protagonist goes on. He realizes he can't look, he can't listen. How do you navigate this strange terrain? And I learned as much as anybody else did at authoring it as they will reading it.
Yeah, it very much reminded me of the movies The Quiet Place, right? With those aliens that you can't speak, right? Or else they have super sonic hearing, they'll find you, right? But they are blind. So to me, this could almost be like a very soft parallel, because it reminded me of the three monkey idols, right? Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. So I thought that was some pretty cool connection there.
Well,
Uh,
someone made a really accurate observation early on, because in one of my earliest postings about introducing the book to the online communities, I was using the it was kind of a log line. Aliens meets A Quiet Place in this supernatural thriller or something like that. And someone correctly observed, aren't aren't the monsters in A Quiet Place aliens? So what do you mean aliens meets A Quiet Place? That's aliens meets aliens. And I wanted to really differentiate between the aliens of A Quiet Place. Yes, they're both sensitive to hearing. Yes, they don't see too well. The ones in The Quiet Place are blind. Mine are not blind. Their visual acuity is based on movement, more or less. So much like a T-Rex in that regard. And so they're not entirely the same. Those monsters are ground bound in A Quiet Place. Mine are aerial. And so I did have to draw some differentiating lines to say that this was not the same thing.
gotcha. Uh, yeah, I don't think it once people read volumes one and two, I don't think there's any um, any notion even of being a splinter or derivative uh, at all. It's very, very different writing styles, very different monsters. To me, the Gorgons are much more terrifying. Um, and there's a ton of air of mystery that's going on in both volumes. What I really like that's an element in these stories so far is something that we see reoccur in a fair amount of science fiction where you have this sort of higher authority amongst humans that display themselves in a way to be as monstrous as the monsters that they're fighting, right? What happens at the end of volume 1? Jet is livid. He's in a brig. He's got this bloodthirst for vengeance, right? And justifiably so for what happens to his brother. Um, and he discovers that the president had such a hand in playing basically their entire journey out as a test, right? So in a way, you could very much make the argument that those in charge of the remaining 20% of humanity, um
That's the,
yeah, less than that, they're very much um on some level that's similar to the monsters that are the Gorgons.
it's kind of a physician know thyself type thing. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't think that this is that I was entirely unique in that approach too, because obviously in dystopian societies, and this is one, although it's far more realistic, and there's not a societal gap between the rich and the poor, the elite and the lower class. It isn't that way. We're all trying to work together, but you do have elements present. And don't want to do a spoiler, but the one at the top is obviously the most nefarious. There are people that work for that person that are going to see her, just gave away the gender, they're going to see her missives accomplished. Um, but ultimately, it's just becomes such a nuisance. We are all supposed to be working together. Are you going to shoot me even though there's a Gorgon coming at both of us? Are you really going to shoot me? It's that type of thing, and it's this emotional standoff that happens too, where he's just trying to poor Cameron. He's just trying to do his job, uh, and then they get waylaid by this ridiculous assignment that has tragic implications, but it is a catalyst for him to go down that journey of revenge versus justice. And I think by volume 3, you'll see that he's navigated it well. He had help to navigate it well. Pastor Rosie is a key figure in a smidgen of volume 2, as you've read, and largely in volume 3. She's got great character, and I love her. I loved writing her. So anyway, it's a journey, and it is really sad what even in 2042 we're just still not getting along.
Yeah, no, that's a great chunk of human hubris, I think. So I talked pretty recently about how and why darkness is a universal fear that humans have, and making the enemies of humanity kind of be embodiments of darkness and what the dark represents, right? Fear, anxiety, pain, death. Uh, why all of that makes for some pretty great and compelling villains and bad guys, right? Now, one of the ways to combat this that I came to the conclusion with is through finding a personal path to strengthen yourself and doing it heartily enough to where you're going to be able to handle whatever awaits you in the darkness. It's in every major movie, TV show, whatever, right? The main good guys are preparing to take down the Dark Lord, the Sith Lord, the Padishah Emperor, right? And I know for my part that path, that personal path, has kind of coalesced into very intense physical and mental disciplines. So I work out every day. I force myself to write and to read every day, which I'm sure you know how hard that is. Even though you write like a madman, finishing hundreds and hundreds of pages in seemingly no time flat. But the point is, all of these paths are very difficult to do. They're very difficult things to accomplish. So I'm seeing that in reading volumes 1 and 2 of Dissonance, it seems that religion is a path that you seem to have some of your characters following in order to prepare for the darkness that awaits them. And I know your faith is a staunch hallmark of who you are, and it's kind of clear if you analyze the characters. What was it like writing that part of your character's path? Did some of your own self journey go into writing those strengths?
Oh,
And
absolutely. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, ultimately, the absence of darkness is light, and the absence of light is darkness. And so, you talk about the representation of just our fear and our angst and anxiety and frustrations and struggles in the dark. What better place to have Jet and all of the rest of them go through at the end of volume 2, but in a very dark place? They are running along caverns lit by chem lights, little tiny, skate king, shake 'em, break 'em chem lights. And those are the types of things that they're using to light their path. Obviously, they all have the strongest light that any of us could have as they go along, and that's hope. But once you start pulling out hope, and you see that happening in the end chapters of volume 2 as well, then they're really in a dark place. But absolutely, religion, and I would say, as a Christian, I don't call it religion; I call it relationship. But the formality of religion is such an antithesis for things like darkness and evil and blah blah blah, because the very essence of darkness and the epitome of it is Satan, while the epitome of light is God, Jesus, the Trinity. And so yes, Cam's definitely going on a faith journey there, and I think we saw that in volume 1 through the cynical perception that Cam has of Ruddy's faith. Always kind of like, yeah, whatever, poo-pooed it away. But you'll see by volume 3 that story runs full circle. Uh, and there are other people that I dare say God has introduced, me as the author have introduced, but I've allowed that to kind of be, this is really God redeeming the years that the locusts have eaten. There's a verse that in Joel that talks about that, and Foxy actually quotes that to Kim. There's restoration that happens. There's relationship that happens. There's replacement that happens by God as Cam goes through that faith journey. But boy, Pastor Rosie, first and foremost, she's a pastor. You'll find out more about her in volume 3. But I hope people just love. But she is a pastor, and she plays a huge, huge role in steering Cam right, away from the dark towards the light. Revenge, that's what he's struggling with. Vengeance, revenge is dark. Justice is light and right. So he's struggling with those, but you'll see that story resolved as well.
that's great. I'm super hyped for volume 3. I feel really set up for it. Um, and something that kind of did that for me was, and without giving anything away, but volume 2 both begins and ends with some kind of mirrored similarities. There's is this sort of rhyming scheme of writing setting us up for volume 3 anyway, or was it something that was uniquely done for this particular volume? Because if you just jump from the beginning, read that chapter, go to the end, read that chapter, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I wanted to give each chapter a very episodic type treatment. So obviously, if you go back now in hindsight 2020, you go back and reread it, don't read the whole thing through. I mean, certainly read the whole thing through and enjoy it again, but the very first line of each chapter mirrors or is mirrored by the very last line of each chapter. So case in point, chapter 1 of volume 1, I was never going to make it, that was my reality. The last line of chapter 1 is we were never going to make it, that was our reality. And then what I tried to do was that's maintained through the entire trilogy. Every single chapter does that of every single book. However, the end of volume 2 ends similarly to the beginning of volume 1, and the end of volume 3 will end similarly as the very first line of volume 1. I like that book ending. That's just how I write myself. But I also, I think, kind of wanted it to be a little bit of an Easter egg. Have someone stumble upon it in volume 2, chapter 6, and go, wait a minute, whoa, whoa, and they're flipping back through all these chapters and they discover that. Um, it does give it a little bit of more of an episodic type treatment where you can give each one as a separate story, all part of the same. They're all battles, all part of the same war.
and I don't know if you've noticed or not, but that's something that's kind of lacking in a whole bunch of major sci-fi fantasy action franchises at the moment. Um, us both being really big Star Wars nerds, right? What's been lacking in Star Wars for the past 10 years? The wars. It's more of a Star Trek, if you would. So me having such a compelling story, number one, really great characters with some pretty good development, number two, and them actually fighting what seems like a nigh insurmountable danger that you have no idea how they're gonna how are these two little hobbits gonna beat the Dark Lord with an army of 1 million orcs, and he's got trolls and fell beasts and all that. How are these two little hobbits gonna do that? I get the same feeling almost reading this story. So and then you turn it into this actual really big and uh, kind of complex conflict. I struggle to say that because there's nothing really in it that I'm not understanding, but it's got several interlocked layers in it, right? There's the overarching story, and then there's a couple of sub stories that weave really well into it, and you're wondering how those smaller sub stories, um, like with the pastor, with that alluded to leader, how are those going to affect the overarching story? So it's that those smaller sub stories, the subtext, the development that really drives this home for me and makes me super hyped for volume three.
That was high praise. I mean the comparison to the two hobbits, going there. Um, there were different things where I really felt like in volume 2, it just kept going up and up and up. The highway fight was so much fun and intensity to write. The highway battle in the tanks, the end flight in the caves was just, it's terrifying. No one likes being trapped in the dark and you can't see and you hear something growling at you. That's a very primal fear that we all have since childhood, being holding the blankets up to our nose and worried about what's under our bed. We know these are gorgons and we already know they're terrifying because we've seen what they've done to people. So, but in volume 3, and I'll totally circle back with you on that one. Um, it just doesn't stop. It goes. It's an exponential curve of conflict, and yes, there are moments of breathing and respite in there, but you find much more of this conflict that's existed all along, and the real goal becomes concrete clear. Becomes glass clear, solid. Concrete solid. And exactly what our protagonist and his team needs to do in order to they have three missions that they have to get accomplished in number 1, number 3 rather. And I don't want to spoil any of those, but you'll see just how hard each one of those three are really going to be. So setting it up for the inevitable conflict was awesome in 2, but I didn't want to cheapen 2. The second chapter is always the hardest to write. God bless Irvin Kershner with Empire Strikes Back because he nailed it, and James Cameron with Aliens because he nailed it. But boy, it's it was a pleasure to write too because it turned out well.
And I'm absolutely thrilled that it did. Um, so going to your personal preferences, not necessarily for writing, but what kind of stories draw you to read them? Like I know you're a huge Star Wars guy, you're a huge Lord of the Rings guy. Um, what are some compelling sci-fi stories that really draw you?
Well, first of all, it has to just be a good story that's unique. Number 1, Oscar Wilde said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." The same is true for a book. If the book is like, and I've read books just more or less to kind of prime the pump as I'm preparing my own stories. And some of them, one of them was just, this is Hunger Games all over again. You're not fooling anyone. This is almost exactly like Hunger Games. So it's just recycled and repackaged and relabeled, shame on you. I like stories that are unique. I like stories with great characters that are memorable. I like stories where the conflict is really clear. The objective is really clear in terms of conquering that source of conflict. But then also, I really like them when they are they're well written to the point of surprise. There's plenty of surprises along the way where you just go, I did not see that coming. And one of the best praises I was given in number 2 for an editorial review was the guy said, I realized, and I should have realized this in 1, but I realized it too late. No one is safe in this series. And it's very much like Game of Thrones in that regard. I don't want to kill off the protagonist because it's first person and then the story would end. But there are, unless I wrote it from dual person perspective, but there are surprises again in 2, and there are many surprises in 3. That's the kind of story I want to write. Like, keep you like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. You want to see that on screen, you know? You want people to throw their popcorn on the screen and go, what? But you want the same phenomenon to be true in a book, to have somebody go, whoa. And I get tingles as I say that because I try to write it that way. We'll see if people thought that was the case.
Yeah, I know what you mean. In one of my favorite book series of all time, the Republic Commando series written by Karen Travis. There's a Jedi in there named Etain, and she has a child with a clone commando, and they're on Coruscant as Order 66 is happening, and the commandos have no idea what's happening. And this is pre Order 66 retcon, so they don't have a whole bunch of brain chips like compelling them to follow the order. It's just, all right, we got this order. Let's go kill all the Jedi, right? So she sees that happening. She goes to save like this little young Padawan on the street, and some local troopers get together and gun her down. And she had been one of the main cast of characters that was the first main character through the series,
Wow.
that you grow to connect with. You don't connect with her right off the bat. She's kind of annoying and like this young know-it-all who doesn't know anything kind of person, right? Um, but then she gets inundated with these Republic commandos and their Mandalorian lifestyle because their sergeant, who is a Mandalorian, kind of raises them to be pseudo Mandalorians, right? So she gets we get all of this culture and this secret baby, and then she gets murked, and man, you thought she was gonna make it to the end, but yeah, there's another novel after that that's kind of dealing with the aftermath of everything, and
I think I think it's very brave, and it may have been you that I talked to about this, or that we talked with together about. One of the things I would love to see, and I actually thought about this for volume three, but it can't end that way, is when a first person story, the protagonist gets killed off. So depending on if you're planning a trilogy or a two-story compilation, or even just one, where the story ends when you kill off the protagonist if it's first person. So it would be really interesting to see that in the middle of a paragraph. I was being chased and I ran around in a corner. I heard the pop and I felt something in me stab, and I dash the end. It'd be really interesting because it takes you completely by surprise. You just killed off your own character, and people are wondering why are there so few pages, left in the book for me to read. He's in the middle of an action sequence, and yeah, I think it'd be really unique. Brave.
yeah, very much so. One of my favorite anime series is called Code Geass, and the main character, spoiler alert, it's been out for over 10 years, so I don't care. The main character does end up dying towards the end, but what he does it on purpose. He brings the world through this world war, and he defeats all of these oppressive evil powers, one of them being his father, the emperor of Britannia. It's set in like real world geography, but he what he does is he makes himself the final enemy of humanity, and he sets up his best friend to kind of take on his pseudo persona and
Huh.
come up and kill him in front of the world. So then the world goes, the demon is dead, the great enemy is dead. So he
Wow.
does this on purpose to unite the world
Yeah,
together.
wow. That's really revolutionary. Wow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. It's a great story because he realizes I can beat my father. I can beat the emperor. I can beat these other countries, but nothing is going to stop this wheel that humanity is constantly going around in, where we have 5, 10 years of peace, another conflict is going to break out. We're going to have dissenters and terrorists do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so I just need to, well, there went that earpiece. Uh, I just need to unite everybody firstly around the biggest threat they've ever seen, and then I need to have that threat eliminated, but I need to control it. Otherwise, it's going to get out of control. It's going to get away from me. I'm not going to be able to stop it. So I'm going to make myself that enemy, and I'm going to martyr myself to save the world.
That was what happened in the Dark Knight Rises, or whichever one, or Dark Knight. I think he
Yeah,
makes himself the fall guy in the end, as opposed to Harvey Dent.
yeah, yeah. Because he very much felt like Gotham needed Harvey way more than they needed him. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I think that about does it for us, Aaron. Thank you so much for coming back on. I love these conversations, man, and I can't wait to talk about volume three.
Well, just know there's a lot more in volume three. It's 100 pages longer than this and this.
She
Uh, and it is loaded. I had such a great time and did such an enormous amount of research, um, for the settings, which take place aboard an Air Force base and an aircraft carrier. And I talked to a 35-year retired captain of an aircraft carrier, two senior airmen in the U.S. Air Force, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, got an Army chopper pilot. I'm tremendously grateful for all the research that I got, and they'll be tagged in the book. Um, it's what I really want is I don't want a chopper pilot or a lieutenant colonel or an Air Force person to read this and go, "What? That's not even what you do." I want it to be like so legit and verisimilitude in the whole way. But it's intense. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
So
that attention to detail, that almost feverish attention to detail, as I'm sure you feel, it reminds me of a letter that the producers of Stargate SG-1 received, because in one episode there's an airman or somebody that refers to uh, Siler, this staff sergeant, as just sergeant. But some military vet out there mailed a letter to the producers and said, "You had this character refer to a master sergeant as just sergeant. That would never happen. Fix it." They're just blown away. They're like, whoa.
there's a convoluted it's a mixed bag in my story, and there's a guy who was very insistent saying, I don't know how I can impress upon you enough how important it is to get this right with who salutes who first and who outranks who. And the problem is in my story that this is after an alien invasion, 16 years. We're all now jumbled together. You have Air Force and Marines and Army and Navy all together on an aircraft carrier, just all of us trying to cooperate and do a job. Well, he's a captain, but so is he. And that's an ensign. Well, we don't even have ensigns in our branch, and a rear admiral. Well, do you ever? It's just kind of like who outranks who. So it was really walking a fine line, but I got some great help. So it'll be hopefully no strong letters.
We can hope not. Well, Aaron, where can people find Dissonance Volumes 1 and 2?
Thank you for asking. So it is not dissident. I have to tell people that, or dissidence. It is dissonance, just like it's spelled right here. Dissonance, theseries.com. So they can actually go there and if they are able to pause their screen for a second, you can actually, zoom in on one of those. So there's
Oh,
social, and then there's the blog. But that's dissonancetheseries.com will have them all, the stories detailed, the timelines. There's a blog you can subscribe to. And from that page, you can launch out to Amazon, Kobo, Smashword, sorry, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, Google Books, blah blah blah, all the different sources where you purchase, or a signed hard copy from moi with a bookmark and a pen. I mean, it doesn't really get any better.
it really doesn't. Not for your avid reader. Certainly not. Well, thank you again, my friend. I cannot wait to talk to you again. I'm sure it's going to be right around the corner with what you're telling me about the progress for volume 3. And it's it's going to be spectacular.
Looking forward to it. I'll circle back when that one's ready.
All right. Thank you, sir. Well, that is all our time for today, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. Stick around for more Sci-Fi Unchained. Be sure to grab volumes 1 and 2 of Dissonance. But for now, live long and prosper, and may the force be with us all.